everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for this conversation with Tommi, Vincent, J.R. Martinez, and Christi Paul. I have the honor and privilege to serve as CEO of the National Domestic Violence Hotline. And at the hotline, we provide confidential 24/7 services to victims and survivors of domestic violence and their loved ones. And we do that through phone, chat, and text. We also provide a program called Love is Respect, which provides essential healthy relationship education to teens and young adults ages 13 to 26. Today, we're pulling this panel together to commemorate Domestic Violence Awareness Month. I am so thankful for the panelists who have agreed to share their experiences, all of you. We recognize this Domestic Violence Awareness Month is a little different given the pandemic, which we were just speaking about, and that we recognize many survivors and victims are currently sheltering in place with their abusive partners during this time. I'm so excited to introduce our friend, Christi Paul, who has been working with the hotline. I looked this morning, I think back 9 years now, Christi. We've been partnering together. Time flies by. If you don't know Christi, she is a weekend anchor for CNN New Day. And during the week, she also anchors on HLN.
I remember, being 4, 5, 6, 7 years old and witnessing, this man and in one instance, two men that wanted to, abuse my mother, hit my mother. And this is a man that I perceived as like my father. He was the guy that was frequently in the house, and he was my father. He's the guy that I looked up to, the guy that I looked at as strong and a man. And to see him go and hit my mother in this way, who was my hero, who was everything to me, was very difficult. And I can tell you that it became sort of practice of sort of like when kids do in school, where they a fire drill or any other drill, depending on where you live in the country, it became this pattern of where we had to practice. Okay, when he decides to drink and he decides to become abusive, this is what you do. You, JR, at this age, this is what you do. And you go and you grab the phone, you dial those 3 numbers, you hide in an isolated space, and you just wait, and you don't come out until someone calls you. And then one night, finally just having enough, Christi, and I just went out there thinking that I can, sort of kind of have some rational, discussion with this man that I perceived as like a father figure to me. And I said, I grabbed his arm, and as he was getting ready to hit my mother, and I said, don't stop, Dad, stop. That's what I called him. And he turned around and he hit me, and he picked both of us up, and he put us in his car, and he drove us around, and he said that he was going to kill the both of us. And that's what he kept saying. And those are things that I didn't understand, Christi, that is trauma that I experienced for, my early developmental years, and not realizing that it still existed in me. All I learned how to do was suppress it and just move forward. And then when my injury transpired on the 5th of April of 2003, now that triggered every other experience and emotion that I had related to that period in my life. And it wasn't until recently that I started to talk about it. And honestly, when I got connected with the hotline a couple of years ago, they encouraged me as well. And I can tell you that the minute that I've started to be open about it and talk about it, I have found this incredible community of survivors, of people that are here to embrace one another and to uplift one another and to show each other a way out, and to guide each other to this way of being able to break the unhealthy cycles, as you talked about in your relationship previously, Christi, and then learn how to create new ones. So I think this is I'm honored to be here, honestly, to listen to you, Christi, and to Tommi and to Katie. I think, we just need to continue to tell more stories of people that have survived and found ways to overcome this and create new cycles.
I think that survivors are here to show other people how to survive.
Yeah.
I love that thought that, maybe God gave you a mountain so you could show people it can be moved.
Yeah.
And with that, I want to bring Tommi into the conversation. She's a chef. She's a mom. She's a grandma, believe it or not, which I still can't believe. But she has a story as well. And yours started in childhood as well. Is that right, Tommi?
That is correct. And actually, yesterday, I was listening to a live that my husband, Troy Vincent, and Joe Torre did. And Troy mentioned something in that conversation that actually brought back another memory from when I was a teenager. And my abuse occurred in my life the entire time I was in high school. And prior to that relationship, I was 13 years old and I was going with a boy. And when I told him that I no longer wanted to go with him, he smacked me across my face. And that was the first time that I experienced abuse. However, because of the visuals that I had growing up, my version of what love was and how love is defined was distorted. And so for me, it didn't translate that love does not hurt intentionally. As a matter of fact, every relationship that I was available to see with my eyesight, there was a lot of forms of abuse, physical, verbal. And so it was really normal. And that pattern of behavior carried through high school for me. And it climaxed the last encounter, physical encounter, was when the perpetrator attempted to throw me off of a bridge. And I remember in that moment, in my, I think I was 17, my whole life flashed before my eyes. And I knew that this is not love. And it was like so fast, the light bulb went off. And it was the first time I was with a friend and I yelled to her, call my mom. And prior to that point, I did everything I could to protect him from getting in trouble for abusing me. And so it's really important for me to share my story and to turn up the volume on domestic violence in particular for young ladies and other women that are in communities where we are not conditioned to seek help. We are not reported statistics. We are the people in the shadows. Because if you're not reporting, if you're not telling, you are not a part of the 1 in 4. And I would venture to say that I'm not counted in that number. And so it's important for me to amplify the message and to encourage other young ladies and teach them about healthy relationships, like the information that you can receive at Love is Respect. What is a healthy relationship? Because everybody deserves to have a healthy relationship. We all deserve to be loved with authentic love. But unless you know what that looks like, unless you understand what that is, you're going to continue to walk into relationships and allow people to treat you in a manner which you do not deserve.
I think you hit on something there that struck me as well, in that we protect our abusers. And we do that because, well, we're afraid. There is a real fear of telling someone, because if we tell someone, one, it makes it real, two, everything's going to change, most likely, and three, you fear backlash from that person, from your abuser. And we know of abusers. One of the things that is of paramount importance to them is being in control. And we also know that when people try to leave, that is the most dangerous part of being abused, because that's when an abuser realizes he or she is losing control in that moment, and things can escalate in a way that can be very frightening. But I wish that I could explain why I protected my then husband from, I didn't tell my parents things. I did, and we were far away. I mean, we talk about being isolated. I got married to him. We immediately moved to Boise. I'm from Ohio. Then we moved to Phoenix. I'm still from Ohio. Everybody's still in Ohio. So I was very isolated anyway. And I remember something happened and I wanted to go home. And he said to me, I am your family now. And it was the first time I recognized that that he was keeping me from my family. And yet at the same time, because I had married him, this is not somebody I was dating. This is somebody that I married. I felt that what he said was true. I took a vow. He was my husband. He was my family. And so I allowed that to be our narrative for a while. I did not call my parents, but I didn't reveal things to them because I didn't want to hurt them, and I didn't want them to know that I was living with some of the things I was living with. My situation was more verbal and emotional abuse. There were a couple of moments of physical abuse. I remember he threw me up against a wall. He had his hand on my neck. He told me he was going to bash my effing head into the wall, and then he punched the wall right next to me, just, close enough for me to hear the swish and putting a hole in the wall. And then he looked at me as though he was saying, next time I'm not going to miss. And he'd get real close up in my face and, scream at me like a drill sergeant. And it was interesting that after I finally left, my mother said to me, and this is probably the hardest part of it for me, to be honest with you. My mother was so glad that I left, because she said, we had an idea of what was going on, and that's the thing. People around you, there are some people that probably are getting a sense. We think we're really good at hiding it, but we're not. People are perceptive. People who know you and love you may not know how to approach you with it, but if something is really wrong, somebody is noticing it. And my mother said to me, I'm so glad you're leaving, because clearly she wanted me to be happy and she wanted me to be safe. But she said, I cannot tell you how many nights I went to bed scared to death I was going to get a call in the middle of the night that you were dead, or that you were in the hospital. And the thought that I had made her feel like that for 4 years was hard, but leaving was such a weight off my shoulders, and her knowing that she didn't have to worry about that call coming, that made a huge difference, obviously, to the way that we live our lives. Even today, what we've been through, all of us here collectively, I know that it has shown us that we're much stronger than we thought we were, that we are wiser, and that we now have the ability to help people in a way that somebody who, and I'm not trying to take away from somebody who's not been through it and wants to help. We need all the help we can get, whether you've been through this or not. But there is a very raw knowledge of what this is, if you've been through it. And healing from it, I know it's taken years. I was going through therapy 10 years after I'd left. And one of the things that I had to do was make lists of how it served me, which sounds insane. I talk about this a lot in my book, because the point of my book was to try to help people heal and understand that this is survivable and that you can actually thrive on the other side of it. One of the lists that my therapist made me make was, what are the benefits of verbal abuse? And initially when you hear it, it was like a jolt. I'm saying, what are you talking about? And she said, listen to me. I'm not saying what happened to you was okay, but I'm saying once you figure out how it served you, it will help you heal. And she was so right. I ended up having 65 answers to that question. It made me more independent because I couldn't depend on him. It made me see marriage very differently. I think as when I was young, I thought, well, at least if you're married, you're not alone, right? You're with somebody. And I was completely showing my own codependency in that mindset, because I also learned then that I'd rather be alone than be with the wrong person. And I learned about forgiveness on a very different level. I always thought forgiving somebody meant, oh, I forgive you too, let's hug and kiss and make up. You can forgive somebody and you can cut them out of your life. You are not only allowed to do that, but you also have to set boundaries, which I was not good at. That's something else I learned. I wanted everybody to be included and everybody's happy and let's let everything be okay. And once you set that boundary and somebody crosses it, you can forgive them because it will help you let go of it. But you have now set a boundary and you don't have to let them back in your life. You are allowed to walk away. And I think that because I was married, I didn't know that I was allowed to walk away. And Tommi, I'm wondering, because you were younger, I mean, I was in my late 20s, 25 to 29 when I was married, or 26 to 30, I guess. Did you learn about boundary setting after that, or did you go through years of trying to reconcile what had happened to you and not get into some pattern of dating the same kind of men? Because what I hear from a lot of people is they say, I'm so afraid I'm gonna just date the same kind of person. And I always say, if you do this kind of work that I learned how to do, you won't. How did you get out of that pattern?
So before I answer that, I just want to go back to the point where you talked about in the relationship, the reason why I did not tell was because I cared about him. And I think it's important for victims and survivors to understand your love is not broken. And in that moment on that bridge, when I saw my life flash before my eyes, in that moment, I chose me. Where previously, because of my care and concern for him, I was protecting him and I was setting my own well-being aside in an effort to make sure he was okay. And once I realized in that moment, okay, now this is life or death. So I'm choosing me. And I was able to carry that forward. And from a pattern perspective in relationships and boundary setting, not too long after that, I left for college and I met my husband, Troy, whom some of you know. He is a fierce advocate in this space. And I was 19. And so I got married really young, and Troy and I we crossed paths and were not aware of the trauma that we both had experienced in our own way. Troy being a child, watching his mother being abused, and myself being a victim of the physical assault itself and the verbal abuse. And so I carried into our relationship a lot of that baggage, because once again, it's not that someone taught me how to have healthy relationships. I went from one bad relationship to one amazing relationship, but I was still bringing those scars and those wounds into that relationship. And so it was a process in order for me to get where I am today. As a matter of fact, when I was 38, I did go to counseling. And the counseling was a culmination of many things, but one of the things on the table was recognizing the abuse and also recognizing that it had nothing to do with me. It was not my fault. And there's a lot of victims and survivors carry the burden of the abuse as if there's something they could have done differently. If I just do it this way, he won't or she won't, get in my face, or, just tiptoeing through life, trying to prevent the abuse from happening. It's not you. It's not the victim. It's not the survivor. When you reach that realization and you turn that power that you give to the assailant and you change that power back to yourself, that's when you have the opportunity to start your path of healing. And it is a process and it does take time. And my boundary setting today is fierce, and I don't let anyone cross my boundaries. And you talked about the list that you made, about what you got out of that. I recognize that moment in time, as horrific as it was, it has been fuel for my rocket. It has empowered me in ways that that experience itself, I would have never imagined that I would be who I am today, but I can look back and honestly say, I'm not the same woman I am today without that situation.
Yeah, I remember when I started the therapy, Tommi, my therapist, said at the end of this, you're going to be able to say thank you to him. And I didn't, but I could if I wanted to. It's just because I have no communication with him at all. But I understand what you were saying when you said because you loved him. I stayed because I loved him, and because we see in our abusers this momentary light, these moments of love and of goodness, and we cling to that because we want them so much to be what we see in them. And in addition to that, if they really are that, then maybe we didn't make a mistake, is what we might be thinking. You know, it's not only getting them off the hook, we're trying to take ourselves off the hook. And you're right, it's not your fault if you're being abused. That is one of the many tactics that abusers use. If you had not done this, then I would not have hit you, or I would not have done this. That is a tactic, but it is not truth, because at the end of the day, we are all responsible for ourselves. We are all grown people. And even if you're not grown, even if you're a teenager, you do not ever deserve to be hit or physically abused or emotionally abused or stalked. I can't imagine what people go through these days on digital, as we talk about digital abuse as well. That's why I'm so grateful, JR, that you're talking about this, because if you look at the pattern of all of us here, you are the man. And having a male voice in this conversation means everything. What is resonating with you most in this conversation thus far?
Well, I'm sitting there, you know, as Tommi talked about Troy, and what Troy experienced is very similar, you know, to what I experienced growing up, and listening to the both of you talk about your experiences. It's taken me to a place of remembering my mother being in that position, and you know, memories of how the abuser would frequently use the same tactics, right? Um, and for me, I think, you know, it's as Troy, obviously he's an incredible advocate, but he's also learned how to break the cycle, and me too. And I think the key is that I didn't know how to break the cycle early on. You know, in my early 20s, when I was obviously still navigating, trying to figure out my place in society and how I fit into society with my new norm, I found myself, a lot of those emotions from that experience as a child started to surface and would show itself in a very dark way. And I found myself verbally at times being abusive, and not necessarily to one particular individual, but to maybe a multitude of people around me, just because I was angry and I was upset. And I finally had to come to the realization that it was me, that I was upset with myself. I wasn't happy with myself. There were a lot of things that I needed to address myself. And yet all I was doing was projecting out onto other people. And so for me, it's what I had to start remembering is that I didn't like the feeling that it gave me as a child witnessing my mother go through that. I didn't like the feeling it gave me as a child witnessing that. I never want to be, I never want to create that same feeling for anybody else. I never want to put another child in that same position. I don't want to put a woman in that position. And for me, it was very much about connecting with that feeling that it gave me and reminding myself of that, and then saying, what do I need to be doing differently so I don't continue that cycle. I break it. And a lot of that was, you know, Christi, you talked about going to therapy, and you know, I had to go to therapy. And the one thing that I learned a lot in therapy, not just related to that experience, but a lot of things in my life. But the one thing I try to do is encourage my mother to go to therapy. And the challenge is that from a cultural standpoint, being Hispanic, That is not something, or even in a minority community, that is not something that is openly discussed or openly embraced. And it was a challenge. It was a barrier for her. And I can tell you that in listening to the both of you talk about your experiences, how you've come out on the other side of it, right? Christi, you're now in this beautiful relationship and healthy, and Tommi, you as well. And you understand now what it means and what it looks like, and you're showing that to your children, and Tommi, your grandchildren or grandchild. I don't know if it's more, one or two, I don't know. But the point in that being is that, you know, I am also here presenting an alternative for those that are out there right now that feel like, you know, I don't need to take that step. I'm here to tell you that my mother chose not to take that step and has still chosen not to take that step. And I'm here to tell you that it has affected her life today. That even though the abuser is long gone, is no longer in her life and our lives, has had no communication with her for years, yet it's still present. The effects of everything that he did is still present in her life because she has refused to go and to find a safe space to talk about it. She has refused to reach out to, for example, a hotline. She has refused to go and seek someone out and to be able to create a safe space for herself to talk. And so it is crucial for people to be able to get to that place of understanding that, hey, you're not weak because you go and seek help. That's not, it's almost equivalent to like the military, right? Like there's a lot of people that say for veterans, if you go and get help, you're weak. And it's like, no, well, I make the argument that if you don't, then you're weak, because you know you need to, you know you should, you know you can't do it alone, but you're purposely choosing to try to go on this journey alone, and you don't have to, because there's incredible resources for you.
Mhm.
So for me, Christi, to your question, a very long-winded answer to your question is, I just remember that feeling. And I want to be able to be a part of a team that helps in that feeling. So other children don't have to grow up with believing that's what love looks like, that's what it feels like, that's what it sounds like. And other women, or in some cases men also as well, understand it's okay to walk away. I'm worth more. As you posted yesterday, Christi, on social media, you talked about you are enough, you are smart, you are strong, you matter, you're all of those things. And we have to be able to tap into that feeling and understand that we are. But we need teams to help us. We need people to help us get there.
And that's what the hotline does.
Absolutely.
And it's easy to say I need to believe this without, but it's hard to get to that point. You know that I'm supposed to believe this about myself, but I don't necessarily. And nobody believes that about themselves 365 days a year. Let's just be honest. We have good days, we have bad days. I want you to learn to be kind to yourself. That is so, so important. I beat myself up a lot mentally, because every time there was an incident, I knew I was supposed to leave. I knew I shouldn't stay there, but I did. And then that just is another weight, another brick on, you know, this wall that you're building up around yourself. And you're just, I hate to say that you're making it worse for yourself, but I did. I absolutely did that without searching for help, without admitting that this was happening, without confiding in somebody. I was trying to carry a load that I was not meant to carry alone. And that's why Katie, I think, does what she does. And Katie, you have got to have, I mean, I cannot fathom the heart that you have to do what you do. I mean, Tommi and JR and I, we all want to help, and we will do whatever we can, but you are in this every single day. What brought you to this?
Yeah, well, thank you all for sharing your stories and being vulnerable with 60 strangers. So thank you so much for that. You know, I really feel like the work found me. And when I was going to school, I kept getting placed in internships that were in domestic violence programs randomly. So I feel like my higher power made a path for me that was really clear what I was supposed to be doing. I feel really fortunate and lucky to work with 180 amazing people at the hotline who share a passion and commitment to want to end domestic violence. And I think really it's about a lot of what you guys were speaking about, that there is hope, there is an opportunity to heal, and everybody deserves to live a life that is free from violence. Tommi referenced the statistic, 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men will experience physical violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime. So for folks who are joining us today who may not be a victim survivor themselves, but it's nearly impossible to move about the world and not becoming in contact with someone who is. And they may not know that there is help or that there are resources. I think that's what we find oftentimes, that survivors feel alone. They feel like this is only happening to them. And you all talked a little bit about that guilt that you carried, that blame you were carrying in the relationship as well. And we hear a lot about that, about, how do I make him stop doing this? Or how do I make my partner stop doing this? It must be me. And we're really wanting to change that so that, as Tommi said, it's not the victim survivor's fault. And domestic violence is such a complex issue. You guys have talked about so many of the different types of ways abusive partners isolate, create fear, manipulate, use power and control in relationships, that it is really important that we think about safety planning in these spaces, because it is so complex that it is really important to reach out to a confidential hotline like the National Domestic Violence Hotline to ensure that you're working with someone who knows the different strategies someone can be using to keep you in that relationship, so that you can safely keep your own safety during that time, or find a way to exit that relationship if what you're seeking to do. And if you're someone watching and you're a friend, coworker, neighbor of someone you suspect, because you all said it, when you leave that relationship, someone says, I knew something wasn't right. We're wanting to move the conversation right now where people feel like they can take action and they can reach out to that person and say, are you okay? I really care about you. I'm always going to be here for you no matter what, and remain a non-judgmental partner while this person is working through their process of making a decision to live a life that is free of violence.
You made a very good point there, because we actually got a question from somebody who was asking, what would the hotline recommend for someone who may be concerned about somebody in their life in an abusive relationship? People don't know how to approach that when they suspect something. I'm wondering, Tommi, was there anybody that went to you? And if so, what was said that maybe did make you think about it? And what didn't work, if something was said that just maybe made you defensive?
So there was one particular time when my father got wind that the relationship that I was in was not a healthy relationship. And he picked me up from work, and my job passed by the boy's house, and he pulled the car over. And when he pulled the car over, I knew immediately that he was like, we're addressing this. And I remember screaming and crying, and no, he's not hurting me. And so I became extremely protective and defensive in that situation, because I was not at a place where I was ready to do that. And I think it's really important, and Katie, you mentioned this, when someone is in an abusive relationship, it's easier said than done to walk away and to exit out of that relationship. And they really need people that will support them no matter what. I had a friend who was in an abusive relationship for 13 years. And she would come often, she's leaving, and she would talk about it. And I would encourage her, and I would provide her with resources, and she would go right back with him. But she always knew there was no judgment, that I was going to be there for her no matter what. And I think that is so critical. So if you know someone who you believe is in an abusive relationship, just love them with authentic love, because that's where they're being deceived. They believe the love that they're receiving from their abuser is love, and it is not, because love does not hurt intentionally. So it's important to be present for them in a real way, so when they are ready, you can be the person that they can rely on to help walk them out of that situation to begin their healing.
If the love that you will show somebody in that moment will distinguish to them what love is and what love is not. And I've talked to a lot of people who have lost friends because they've confronted them and their friends go back and then their friends won't come back to them. And it's not because they did anything, they weren't being necessarily judgmental. From an abuser's standpoint, there is a humiliation involved, just so you all know. When a lot of times when we go back, we know we shouldn't be going back, but we do for whatever reason. Maybe you have children, maybe you are financially dependent on that person. Maybe you're just scared and you think going back would be safer than leaving because leaving could make it worse. Everybody has their own reasons. And when you, as an abused person, when you feel that you are being judged by somebody, that just adds to the judgment you already feel when you're in that abusive relationship. The judgment from the person who is abusing you and the judgment that you are putting on yourself. Now, if you've got an outside friend who you feel is putting a judgment on you as well, sometimes that's just a weight that people can't handle. So I think, Tommi, what you said is so imperative. The best thing that you can do as an outside influence is to just, and sometimes you don't even have to say, I know what's going on. I think there are words that you can use. You might say, I'm scared for you and I want you to be okay. And you always have a place to come. You can always come to my home. I don't care if it's 2 a.m. You can come to me anytime. Sometimes just finding out that somebody else recognizes it and knows makes it real enough to encourage someone to leave. If they go back and they tell you they're going back, you just say, if you can just say, my door is still always open whenever you need it. And that no judgment mentality is healing at the end of the day. JR, have you ever experienced something like that?
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in because that is so powerful with, what you guys are talking about. And it makes me think about, with Tommi talking about, just having that emotional support, supporting somebody emotionally and unconditionally, and just despite whether they stay in that situation because they're still trying to understand what options they have or what resources are available to them, or just developing that moment to where they can take that step. Whatever it is, to be able to still unconditionally be there to love and support somebody is crucial. I can tell you that, when I was going through that period in my life and in my early 20s, when I was just angry and upset with the world, my best friend sat me in the passenger seat of his car one night and he told me that I needed to cry. And prior to this, every time we either ended a phone conversation or, just kind of went our separate ways in person, he would always end by saying he loved me. He's like, I love you. And I would always say, okay, I'll talk to you later. And I didn't understand how to process that information. I never had a man tell me he loved me. And of course, the last time I told a man that I loved him, he was hitting my mother. And so I, of course, stopped doing that, engaging in that pattern of behavior. And I could tell you that at night after he told me I needed to cry and I needed to get all this stuff out, it was so relieving just to be able to have that space where I can just let go and share. And I felt that he was not going to judge me, and he didn't judge me. And to tell you how powerful that conversation was the next day, because we were traveling. The next day, when we separated to go to our gates, I'm the one that actually initiated the I love you, man. And I meant it. I felt it because I felt that he loved me unconditionally, like he was there to support me. And unfortunately, that was something I was seeking most of my life, because the love language my mother learned was I love you with condition, under a certain condition. And unfortunately, because my mother never unlearned that behavior, she projected that pattern of love and that example of love onto me and to my sister and to every other relationship she was a part of. So that's what I learned. that love is this, and you can't be vulnerable. You have to be strong. And because that was my mother's defense mechanism, and that was the way that she had to survive. And I see that in the chat, there's a couple of questions related to like what people would recommend. What would you do if, Christi, there's a question directly to you, like, okay, your parents knew, what would somebody do? And to me, this almost reminds me of when people ask me the question related to veterans. If you know that veterans are suffering, what do you do? What do you do for them? And I was like, you just listen. You just do what my best friend did for me. You support them. You don't judge them. You don't judge the situation that they're in. You're there for them. You listen. You unconditionally listen and support. And then the resources that that are available to them, you slowly start to show that to them and just say, here, when you're ready, it's here for you. It is here for you and all of you. And they will help you create this and create that. And I think that is something for me, that when you guys are talking about this, that's what's standing out to me, is this element of, of having to learn your love language, and learn, what love really is. But you only learn that when you have people like Tommi was alluding to, when you have people that are willing to be there and support you unconditionally throughout the whole process, even if you are maybe going to go back to the abuser. My mother kept going back. He would get locked up. He would get released. She wouldn't press charges. And guess where he was? A couple days later, he was back at the house. And then what happened is I started developing resentment towards my mother, because now I'm saying, well, you're choosing this. You're choosing this not only for yourself, but you're choosing this for me, you're choosing this for us. Why are you doing this? And as a kid, and living in my mother made less than $30,000 a year. You can imagine the communities we lived in. There was no discussion of resources available to us. I mean, we were just literally just trying to survive. So I think this is something that not only affects those communities, but it affects all communities. Even the most well-versed communities that you may live in, there's somebody potentially suffering. And so the key is, how can we all show up better for one another?
Yeah, and it's very important what you pointed out about how you were growing up. But this is a problem that is not immune to any socioeconomic status. It doesn't matter where you work. You could be a teacher, you could be a doctor, you could be working at a fast food restaurant. It doesn't matter. People who abuse come from all walks of life. Yep. And I don't know about you, Tommi. I think I thought I can love him out of this. I thought I can show him love, and he will understand it. Right. This is what we think. We think we can do this. So Katie, I know that we had somebody asking a question about, and it's so valid, as I was talking about earlier, I don't know how the people that answer the phones do this, but what kind of support systems are there for the people at the hotline who are answering these phone calls? Because I think, and correct me if I'm wrong here, the people that are answering the phone lines are people who have their own history sometimes in this as well, and that's what gives them this motivation to help somebody else in the same position. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. We do have advocates who are survivors themselves. We have a robust wellness program for our team. I saw the question, and thank you for recognizing the amount of trauma that advocates across the country who are working in this space are encountering every single day. And just like physicians and ER staff during this pandemic, shelter staff have been showing up at shelters to continue to provide support. Advocates are still showing up to staff hotlines, take food to people, clothes to people. So it's been incredibly intense. So it is important that anyone who's doing this work has a wellness program in place. We talk a lot about how do we separate and have a balance between our life and our work, because it can have long-lasting impacts. Our advocates have talked about, hearing a song and then sobbing because it brought up something that they heard with someone that they'd spoken to on a phone call or seen in a chat. So we do a lot of support, and we have a licensed clinical psychologist who supports our team in developing wellness programs. We talk a lot about laughter and joy in the workplace, and how do we connect with the goodness of life, because there is a lot of good in the world, and we have things like bells that people will ring when someone gets into a shelter, and how do we celebrate the great things that do happen when someone, I mean, I still cry, and I think we received this thank you letter many years ago, but I'm gonna cry right now even saying it again. This woman wrote this letter and said, thank you, I've been calling you for 10 years. 10 years she'd been calling. And that night she had left with a suitcase in the back seat. And she said, if you hadn't been with me on this journey for this long, I wouldn't be in this car. So it's what you all have said, it is a journey. A survivor may go back multiple times. Being able to be with them in that space, being non-judgmental. I love Tommi's words, authentic love. That is really critical, because we often find that survivors don't believe they're worthy of it. So having someone in their life who is showing them that is really changing. And JR, you talked about that as well. What is unconditional love, and what does that look like when someone will stand by you no matter what? And that is the beauty of the hotline. And that's, you know, I know there's some folks who are joining who were part of the initial design when the hotline was created almost 25 years ago, with this vision that there would be people on the other side of that line to walk with you essentially through that fire, to ensure that we're with you every step of the way, regardless of whatever space you may be in or what options might exist for you.
I think what JR said too is important to emphasize, that as somebody who has been abused, all we're looking for is a safe space. We're looking for a safe space to fall. Mm-hmm. So being that safe space for us in that moment is everything. And the hotline does that. Obviously, we have this question. We have two questions I want to get to real quickly. One is, how can we help create awareness that domestic violence must be addressed urgently? One of the things that was said to me after I left, actually, a woman who is a friend of my mom's, and my mom had confided in her what was going on. And this woman she was a teacher. She's beautiful. She loves children so much that, you know, any kid that walked in the room, it was like a party. I mean, she was never somebody you would think had gone through this. And I had been in it for 4 years, and she looked at my mom and she said, you tell her not to wait 25 years, like I did. That was a moment for me, because I thought about that urgency. Like, how many years of my life am I going to give to this before I let this happen? So between that and the digital aspect of this, Katie, because I don't know, Tommi, I mean, and JR, that was not really an issue as much when I was in it, because we are living in different times now. But what does the hotline need more than anything, first and foremost? And two, what advice do you give for people who are being harassed or bullied or stalked on a digital level?
Yeah, okay, well, thank you. Certainly, I think as we look at the domestic violence service system in general, not just with the hotline, it has historically been a service system that has been under-resourced and overburdened. The demand for services far exceeds the resources that are given to address the issue of domestic violence. So if you're someone listening and want to make a difference, obviously the National Domestic Violence Hotline, as well as local programs across the country, are always seeking help financially to provide additional resources to hire staff, to increase the number of beds in their shelter. So if you're looking for your local program, you can actually call the National Domestic Violence Hotline, and we will help you find a program in your local community. This new space around digital abuse is a very interesting space, and it feels like every time we get a handle on it, we find a new way that it's being leveraged to harass and manipulate and create fear. So there's a lot of, if you visit our website, there is a lot of information around digital abuse and ways that you can safety plan around that. Recognizing that there is this space where many people don't think there is a thing called digital abuse, that, you know, people give their passwords to all their social media to their partner. We're hearing stories where partners are posting pictures on social media, creating a lot of fear, or maybe they have pictures that they're threatening to put up on social media. Or maybe they're threatening to out someone's sexuality in that space. There are a lot of ways that people are using these platforms to keep that person in that relationship and to manipulate and intimidate. So it's important to get educated about what are the different components of domestic violence. We've touched on a lot of them here today. Digital abuse is one of those, but it is really important to always remember, and I think Tommi said this earlier, no one deserves to be in a relationship where you're not treated with dignity and respect, where you can have healthy boundaries that feel good to you without repercussions from your partner, that you can speak freely and not be afraid of what might come on the other side of that. And so that's, our vision statement at the organization is that we envision a world in which all relationships are positive, healthy, and free from violence. And that's what we're really hoping people will have, whether you're older right now, we have people who are in their 60s, 70s, 80s calling us, or you're a young person. We all have the ability to change the future.
Somebody just was asking, somebody asked me specifically if me going to Arizona and Boise with my ex-husband, if there was a reason that I did that other than being married to him, if there was a job issue. No, I went because I was married to him. I just, by the grace of God, always found a job. I have come to know enough in this business, and just in life in general, that there's, God always gives you a second chance. Like, you might think that you have blown it to the nth degree and you're never going to get out of whatever you're in. I have gotten out of it again and again and again. It is, you have second, third, fourth chances all the time. We just sometimes have to be brave enough to take them and honest enough with ourselves, I think. We only have really a minute left. Tommi, I want to give each of you a chance to just say one last thing before we go. Tommi?
Yes. So I just really hope that we can normalize the conversation around domestic violence. There's a reason why you have awareness months. It's because the topic at hand doesn't get the attention, the resources necessary in order to effectively end it for real. And so I think it's really important that we normalize the conversation so that survivors and victims, that they feel encouraged and they feel empowered and they don't feel blamed and shamed. So I really hope that, we will continue to move this conversation forward. Obviously, the hotline, this is 24/7, and there's advocates available via chat at thehotline.org, or you can call 1-800-799-7233 if you need assistance. In order for that type of work to continue, resources are necessary. And so just being in a space where we can normalize the conversation and really make an effort to do our best to end it and stop blaming victims for domestic violence.
JR?
I would just say you're not alone. We need more stories like you, survivors. I want you to know that, as Tommi said, the hotline.org is a great place to start. There's obviously the phone number, as she said, which is 1-800-799-SAFE. But we need you. We need you. We need you to talk about it. We need all of us to come together. We need to support each other. We need to be there for each other. And what has happened or what potentially may be happening to you does not define you. This does not have to be your story, and you have the potential and the ability and the resources and the community that'll help you be able to create the story that you want and you deserve for yourself and your family.
Katie?
I think you all are a testament to hope, and I hope that anyone that is listening, watching today, knows that they are not alone, as JR said, that there is hope and that healing is possible and that a life without violence is absolutely possible.
Yeah, I think that it's important to recognize. The first thing I thought of what I wanted to say at the end was that you're not alone. So I think that's a universal feeling that we have, because we have all felt that aloneness when you're in that moment and you feel that hopelessness and think that it's only you, but it's not only you. And there are people fighting for you. And even though you may not feel powerful right now, the truth of the matter is you have the power to say, this is not how my story is going to end. And you have people around you who are supporting you. Even if you don't know those people, there are people that don't even know you right now who will help you make that a real truth in your life. So I think we're going to say goodbye, but Katie, I'm going to give you the last word here, and just thank you, everybody, for sharing your stories. And I think this authenticity that we talk about and that we show, I know that we had a question from another survivor who also wants to help, and that is huge. And I don't think you can underscore how important survivors are to this, or how important the male voice is to this. One of the things that I didn't get to mention that I wanted to say real quickly, I remember talking to a man from Men Stopping Violence, which is another organization that I've talked to many times. And he said they had done a study and talked to some men who were abusers and who were jailed for being abusers. And one of the overarching themes they found was when they talked to them and said, "Why didn't you stop?" The men said, "Because nobody told me to." You know, there was no man saying, "Dude, you can't do that. You can't treat her like that." That is the importance of the male voice in this conversation. That's why, JR, I think it was so important to have you here as well. But I just wanted to make that last point, and just really implore to you that we are all here for you, and there are so many people that are in organizations that the hotline can lead you to in your community as well. Katie?
Yeah, Tommi, Christi, JR, thank you so much for continuing to be vulnerable in our space, to share your stories of courage, strength, bravery. We are so grateful for you taking a leadership role to ensuring that others know that there's a path out of a violent relationship, or we have the opportunity to interface with them before they get into a violent relationship or an unhealthy relationship. So thank you. I hope you all know the incredible role you're playing, not only in intervention, but also prevention. Thank you so much for everyone for participating today. If you have other questions or need more information, please visit our website that's been mentioned, thehotline.org, or contact us at 1-800-799-7233. Thank you all so very much.